Hi, everyone. I'm Charles Smith. I'm the Executive Director for Cultural Pluralism in the Arts Movement Ontario. And we're really proud and honored to be hosting these sessions, particularly given the way we approach our work in collaboration with others. So we have Jessa Gilo, the instigator, I want to call her that, behind Arts Pond. And part of our interest in having Jessa do these sessions is knowing the intensity with which she approaches her work and the knowledge she's accumulated. We think it's really important to provide as many opportunities as we can for her to share that. And so we're honored to have her on this platform. I want to begin with a land acknowledgement because, our values with CPAMO come out of our learnings from Indigenous people, which we really think is important. So we know we are in Toronto, Toronto. We know that this is the area that has been, reflects the peoples of Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississauga of the Credit, and many others who have passed through this territory who we may not know their names. We start with that not just to acknowledge the first peoples of this land, but also to look at some of the values that make this place particularly interesting, and that is the one of the dish with one spoon. And as I understand it, dish with one spoon was an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe about how to take care of this part of the earth, that one should be able to take what was needed, be able to take care of the earth, and make sure that what was there for them would be there for the generations to come. We find that an incredible value for us with CPAMO about how we share what assets and resources we have. It's the way we like to work, and certainly understanding that value and how we share events like this with you, because we want to make sure that as a society, we can all grow together, learn from each other, and transform us from the situation that we're in. Right now, just in terms of the importance of relationships, particularly importance of relationships with Mother Earth, we see catastrophe around us. Whether it's wildfires out in California, the various storms and hurricanes that have hit the United States, COVID that has embraced and strangling many parts of the world, particularly marginalized peoples, Indigenous, people of color, etc. We have some lessons to learn about how we can go forward in the future. And so we offer this session as a way of how do we begin to use technology, understand it as a way to bring these values to others and to be sure that our communities, because our sessions are for Indigenous Black people of color, and we always say Indigenous first because we are on Indigenous territory. And we always say Black second because since 1630, we were the first racialized peoples here without our consent, and are amongst racialized people probably the least acknowledged and recognized in the public sphere.
Everyone, thanks Charles for the generous introduction. It is my delight and pleasure and honor to be here with all of you and to try to share some of my some of the tools that I'm using. And I'm going to preface this with I'm not aware, and there are not enough tools that are designed by and for Indigenous and Black and other people of color racialized groups. So a lot of the tools I'm aware, a lot of the tools that I'm going to be sharing with you actually come from very white communities. Not all of them, but many of them are very white oriented, and I'm very dissatisfied by that. Part of it is, okay, I've been in this business for a very long time, and I've learned to rely on certain tools over the years. And I'm wanting to shift my practice and the tools that I use in the future to be much more supportive of equity-seeking thinkers and developers and designers around technology. But let's just accept that at this point in time, the tools that I'm sharing today don't quite represent the community that we are trying to serve through CPAMO and through this workshop. So let's dive in from that perspective, if you don't mind. And when I learned more about more Black, Indigenous, disabled arts, queer, other equity-seeking groups building tools that will help for public engagement in the arts, I will let you know through ArtsPond. The focus of session today, session 2 today, is essentially using digital tools internally to help share out your work, your content in the public world. And for those that don't know how to contact me, you can reach me through ArtsPond at jessa@artspond.com. And I'd like to thank Canada Council for the Arts and Government of Canada for the support in keeping ArtsPond alive. As a young art service organization working nationally, prioritizing equity-seeking groups, we resonate very much with all the values that CPAMO and that Charles was just talking about. We have many projects. You can reach me personally at Agilo Arts or at ArtsPond 8. I Lost My Gig, Arts United, Digital ASO, and Ground Story are some of our biggest projects. Basically, we see ourselves as a change maker using artistic practice to try to boost healthy ecosystems, both in real communities on the ground and in virtual channels in the cloud. We try to kind of boost and further equity justice through multiple means, including looking at social, spatial, economic, and digital issues in the arts and culture sector. The agenda for today is similar to the first session. We're going to do a short walkabout with you on how you are currently using digital tools, just a question about how you're currently using digital tools and what challenges, needs you have around going public with your digital content. And then I'll share where my perspectives and what some of the factors were when I was trying to decide what tools to use, both as a freelancer for many years, 20 years, but also trying to launch ArtsPond quickly and efficiently with a zero budget in the early days. So looking at lots of open source or free or freemium software as alternatives to some of the big solutions that I often can't afford. So we'll actually look at public communications around creating content, and then we'll have a short break, and then share digital tools to help you share that content out publicly once you've designed it, either on social media or on the web, on websites and so on, and then engaging public once you have your content out there, particularly in the COVID situation through live streaming and other kind of video conferencing and so on. Just some recommendations and a few very short demos of some of the tools that I'm using. The last two sessions are much more hands-on, installing the software, getting it set up and using it. So the quick demos I'm going to be doing are very brief, just so you get a sense of it. And then if you want to learn how to use it or set it up specifically, some of the tools I'm showing, then I'll see you at session 3 and session 4. So are we all ready to dive in? Yes? Okay. Let's go. Let's start walking around. We're not stuck in our chairs for 3 hours. Our minds are traveling. So I would just, if you don't have to answer this question, but I'd like you to think about it for yourself. And if you have an answer that you would like to share, you can either unmute yourself or put it in chat. What are your top 3 or even 1 need and haves around using digital tools to engage and communicate your content out into the public? So an example of this, a very basic one, I need an affordable interactive website. I have a website that's old and clunky and not interactive. And clunky could also mean very hard to update and so on. So I'd like to take 2 or 3 minutes to think about this, just so I have a sense of who's in the room and where you're at. And I may shift the priority of some of the tools that I talk about based on if I get some feedback from you in terms of where you're all at and what you need in terms of thinking about using digital tools to help you go to engage your public campaigns. Yeah, so the challenge is the difference between an individual and an organization. there's very few affordable solutions that offer support for both. It's either one or the other. There are solutions that are targeted towards individual freelancers, and they often charge a lot. Like it's a zero fee to join, but you have to give them your email address, and the data privacy agreements aren't that great. And then they charge you a lot if you have e-commerce. They charge you very high processing fees and per transaction fees, which make it very unaffordable long run. Then there's more support and lower cost for individuals, but usually they're just for not-for-profits and organizations. But those usually have a higher upfront cost that individuals can't usually stomach. So if you're kind of like you're a sole proprietorship, you're kind of like a company, and you're not just an individual, or you're somewhere in that middle in terms of being an entrepreneur, it's really hard finding a solution that's going to work for you, that's both affordable and supportive of all your needs. So I don't necessarily have lots of answers, like a specific answer, this will work for you in every situation, but I'm happy to share out the tools that I have on my radar at least. And you can decide and look at them in more detail and decide if they meet your specific needs. What platform to build a future-proof portfolio site on? Yeah, absolutely. I have some good recommendations for that. Okay. Thanks everybody for sharing where you've been at. It just gives me a sense of the room. So thanks for walking with me and sharing a little bit of your perspectives. So the story of the pond, of Arts Pond, I kind of have two components in terms of thinking about going public with our content. Two different channels, our organization, and even when I was a freelancer, when I was a freelance arts manager producer for 15 years before I launched Arts Pond, the kinds of organizations and artists that I worked with were often like this. We have a multidisciplinary practice. We have multiple kinds of actions, research, education, performance, installation, evaluation, not like multi-phases around a single action, so that it's not always a clear package about how to market the events. And multi-regional as well, in terms of us wanting to work nationally and in the future internationally. And also working very hyper locally. So we want our collateral, our content design strategies, but also our technologies to support the creation of content and the dissemination of content that supports all these different perspectives, which is really difficult in finding a single solution. So it's a patchwork. Other perspectives that influence the design of our content and communication strategies are that multi-human. So we have a national team now of more than 40 staff, some in the north and in the territories where internet bandwidth is a huge issue, both the speed of the bandwidth, but also the cost of the data plans. So we need to find as light a solution for the people in the north, because they're paying $400 a month sometimes or more just to get access to the internet, high quality. So we want to have options in terms of software that are light on bandwidth, but also robust enough, because we have lots of people who work and live in Montreal and in Vancouver and Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton, and so on. And they have good internet. So we don't want to necessarily sacrifice the potential, because the vast majority, 80% of our team, works in major cities where internet is good. So we want to take advantage of that, of 4G networks and now increasingly 5G networks being rolled out. We want to take advantage of that to streamline and be more efficient as much as possible with the majority of the team, without giving too much and leaving the people in rural, remote regions behind, and preventing us from working with them. So that creates a need for a patchwork of different kinds of tools for different situations to support different kinds of humans who maybe have tools. So they may have a computer and they may have a tablet and they may have a mobile phone, so they're really deeply connected. Or they may actually only have like a Chromebook, which doesn't allow you to install anything except web browser software. So it's hard to like even give them a copy of Microsoft Word, for example, because it's meant to work in the cloud as opposed to the operating system isn't as robust. So we also have humans that don't have much money and don't have very good or very robust computers to be working remotely, and that's a huge issue that we need to take into account. Multilingual, this won't be the case for everyone, but as we try to recognize and reconcile with Indigenous communities and Franco and Anglophone minority communities so Anglophone in Quebec and Francophone in the rest of Canada, minority, so official language minority communities in different parts of the country, we are wanting to support multilingual dissemination of content. So we want our website to be easily available in English and French. And in the future, we want it to be available in like Inuktitut and maybe in Spanish or in Italian or in Russian without breaking the bank, and also without breaking our brain in terms of having easy tools. So for those of you that are wanting to be multilingual, in terms of a spoken language, there are issues there that need to be taken into account. Also, if you're wanting to be more accessible, there's some new legislation coming out in 2021 that's requiring not-for-profits to be to meet the disability arts or the disability legislation to make your websites more accessible. So we have to be aware of certain technologies that are available there to support us to make sure that people that are blind have that there's a text reader support in your website so that your content can be read out to them, that there's metadata descriptions of all of your content for those that are blind, so that or if they have images turned off because they're neurodiverse and they can't take a lot of content at a time, then you want to have a text description of your content available as an alternate to the actual image. So you want to make sure you have a website or content management software that helps you manage that creation of that metadata, embedded in the images themselves and embedded into the dissemination platforms as well. So it becomes quite complicated and difficult. And when you're trying in this COVID situation to also work and engage in multiple ways through live streaming, in different languages, with deaf people and blind people and so on, we don't want to be stuck on Zoom all of the time. And there's tools like Otter that we're using now in terms of having a transcript, but Otter we're going to talk about it a little bit later. There is a free package, but the most robust one is actually kind of expensive, so it's not accessible to everyone. But there are free options for, if you're having a live event, to have captions included to make your events more accessible. Even if you don't have any deaf people currently with your events, to say there is captions for this event might make it more open to them in the future. And then multi-channel, I think you all know what that one means. Like there's just so many social media channels now and so many dissemination platforms, whether you're for e-commerce, whether you're you're using Stripe or you're using and all these other platforms that we're going to talk about. Do they all talk to each other? Does your website, if you're using Wix or if you're using WordPress or Blogger or whatever, does your websites talk to your social media platforms, to your e-commerce platforms in a seamless way? Usually not. And so trying to manhandle the creation of images for dissemination in multi-channels is a huge challenge. As well as then the interaction once you've designed those images and they're out there on the web, making sure that your different platforms talk to each other is a huge challenge. So I don't have answers to all of these today because it's only a 3-hour workshop. But we'll try to give you some recommendations on some of these issues in terms of the choices that I've made. And I'll try to point out question marks that are still kind of unsolved in terms of what we need and what's coming with the Digital Strategy Fund. There's about 425 projects that have been funded through the first 4 years of the Digital Strategy Fund. And there's a lot of amazing platforms being developed, and they're not necessarily all here yet, but hopefully they will be soon. So we can talk a little bit about the DSF fund and what might be coming from Canada in the future. Okay, so that's a little bit about our story here and my context. So that hopefully is a bit of a frame on when we're looking at the different solutions, the different tools for creating content, and sharing that content and engaging with your publics. Hopefully there's a frame on how and why I've made some of the choices that I have. Okay, ready to go? Go forward? Yeah? Okay. So about 3.5 or 4 years ago, this is just a bunch of logos. About 3.5 or 4 years ago, I started doing a sector scan of asking the question, what is a digital arts service? And who is out there in Canada and internationally, either developing digital tools, platforms, networks, or literacy and research? What kind of tools and organizations and ecosystems are out there that are supportive of the arts ecology? Not all of these logos here come explicitly from the arts, but most of them, if they're not from the arts, do target the arts in some way or another. I didn't have time in the PDF to add hyperlinks to all of these logos, but I will do that, and I will share a version of that with CPAMO so that in the future you'll be able to just click on all of these logos in the PDF version of it, and it'll take you to their websites. I'm going to talk about some of these in a little bit more detail as we go along, but what I just would like to pull out a couple here. The idea of a cooperative, a platform cooperative, if you've never heard of it, the idea of a platform cooperative is to try to fight platform capitalism. So we look at digital companies and digital solutions like Amazon and Apple, which have both doubled their profits in less than a year. In part because of for Apple, it's in part because of the gig economy and the need for more interactive mobile solutions like the iPhone and the iPads and so on, and also because of COVID for Amazon, where Apple was like just a year ago was worth $1 billion, like $1 billion more. In just 1 year. Actually, is it $1 billion or is it's $1 trillion? I think they were the first company to be worth $1 trillion. And then this year, as of after COVID, they're now worth $2 trillion. Like they've literally doubled, not in billions, but trillions in 1 year, their economic worth. And Amazon similarly has doubled their worth in just a couple months. Because of our pivot and shift to the gig economy and because of the pandemic. And this idea of like supremely the most profitable companies in the history of humanity are their approach, even though we may like them in some ways, their approach to go global is actually very exploitive and very extractive. And so we want the idea of a platform cooperative is to, okay, how can we take capitalism not out of the equation, but not make it first, not make for profit for the founders, the developers, and the shareholders, which are limited numbers, but for the benefit of the digital tools is for the public, and profit comes in a little bit later, and profit is, in terms of priority, comes in a little bit later. And profit is shared with not just shareholders, but all the members. And the future of the software and the future of the community is governed just like a housing cooperative. The future of the software and the ecosystem that the software is supported is governed by the members and its users. So there are a couple here that I would pull out in terms of tools that you could start joining now. Resonate is a music dissemination streaming platform that's a cooperative. It's based in the US, unfortunately. Smart.coop, we can't join Smart. It's based in the EU, but they were a not-for-profit that's offering financial services to gig economy workers. And they recently changed from a charity to a cooperative. And there's people in Quebec and elsewhere trying to look at bringing SMART to Canada. We here at ArtsPond are actually building an alternative. It's called Arts United. That's a platform co-op around financial services. Another one in Canada is Culture Creates. They're creating a platform cooperative called Arts Data around discoverability of arts content, arts events, starting in the performing arts currently, to help promote and make sure that your events are discovered and found by every web crawler, every web app, every ticket sales event that's out there. That by using a little Culture creates a little free snippet. You can add it to your website, and it helps make all of your event listings, the metadata, discoverable. So you'll be searchable in a way that perhaps your events are not currently. And there's lots here that may be useful to you, whether you're a visual artist or a performing artist. So Arts People, software for the performing arts, Art Gallery, Art Base, Art Engine, Art Butler are for visual artists, mostly organizations, but some of them might be appropriate to you. Marcato is a festivals a festival management software solution that came out of Nova Scotia and Cape Breton, and they just are closing down next week. Like it's disappearing because of COVID, unfortunately. But they were growing quite. They were the software solution for Coachella in terms of a festival, and there was lots of promise there, but they're not able to keep going, unfortunately. Many of you probably know of Sumac, and I think not many people are happy with Sumac anymore, and it's like it's on its way out. If it's not, it should be on its way out in terms of the technology. So I wouldn't recommend it. But this is kind of the tools that were out there when I did the scan about 3 to 4 years ago. So I'd like to add additional tools that are a little bit more current in the future. And just as an aside, if you missed the first session, one of our projects here at ArtsPond, funded by the Digital Strategy Fund, is called Digital ASO, or OSA numérique, ASO standing for Art Service Organizations. We are going to be building an ecosystem mapping tool, which will have digital tools that are supportive of arts and culture, heritage, tourism, and creative industries. And so you'll be able to, if you are making a tool, you'll be able to put your tool into the map through an interactive mapping process. And then people in need will be able to find, you'll be able to discover and match make people in need with digital champions. And that will include not just platforms, but like knowledge resources and hubs and so on. As well as like wishes. So I wish there was this. Can someone build it, please? In terms of an ecosystem to try to, like there's 425 projects in the Digital Strategy Fund, and it's almost impossible unless you spend a lot of time to go in and find them. So we'd like to make sure that the community knows them, knows about those projects, as well as more broadly the ecosystem, what tools are best recommended for different uses. So that's coming sometime next year. We're starting it next month, so it's stay tuned for it. All right, so let's, and that's enough prefacing. Let's get into the good stuff. So let's talk about creating content for public dissemination. So this is like graphic and web design. So I think there's no surprise that Adobe is the leader of this. Really, Adobe. I personally still use Master Collection Creative Suite 6, which was the last edition of that was available in 2012 as standalone software. Includes Photoshop, Encore, After Effects, Premiere, InDesign, Flash, although Flash I don't use anymore, Flash and Flash Builder, but Illustrator, yes, Bridge, Fireworks, Dreamweaver, Audition, SoundGrade, I forget, Prelude, I think is what PL is, Lightroom. Are kind of the solutions that, and Adobe Acrobat was usually separate from the Master Collection, but those are the software solutions that I've been using for a long time. And now it's the shift in the entire economy really around digital because of, in part because of pirating, but of standalone software, so bootleg being disseminated and software companies losing a lot of money. So it's partly due to that, and it's also partly due to just the shift towards much more online collaboration that Creative Cloud has replaced Master Collection Creative Suite. And it's not possible to get standalone software for the most part, at least not the full suite. And it's mostly online, and it's actually much more profitable for them because of the subscription packages. So you don't pay, it's not a one-time fee, it's like an annual fee, and they have some kind of guaranteed income every year, as opposed to an influx in 2012 and 2013 when Master Collection is like CS6 is released. They have a huge influx of money, and then no money until like there is no CS7, but until CS7 was released, there'd be like 2 or 3 years where they're developing the next edition where they're not making any money, whereas subscription packages, okay, there's guaranteed money every year, and they can constantly update on a regular basis. So my preference is still to have standalone software options and then some on the cloud, because I don't have the money to pay, I don't have a budget to pay the year end after subscription fees. I want to pay a one-time fee, and then that's it. So some of you may be in that same situation. But Adobe really, in terms of graphic design, seems to really dominate the sector. But there are lots of options that you can play with that I'd like to talk about. So before I do, though, for those that aren't graphic designers, I want to make 2 important distinctions around different kinds of graphic design, where there is, and many of you, if this is pretty basic, just bear with me. I'm sharing it in case some of you are not entirely comfortable with this. There are 2 kinds of software with graphic design. One is pixel-based or raster or bitmap-based. Just means that it's like pixel by pixel. And it's very rich in color. You can have lots, so this is like Photoshop, for example. Have very rich colors, lots of gradation in colors from one part of the image to another. Every pixel is editable. When you scale or compress, there's usually, though, however, because it's pixel by pixel based, there's usually loss of quality when you compress or try to make it bigger. And there's like I have some Photoshop files that are like I don't know, 500 gigabytes. They get very large very quickly and take up a lot of hard drive space. So when you're when you're needing to design content across lots of multi-channels and having lots of files, sticking with Photoshop is going to take up a lot of hard drive space very, very quickly. So you may want to look at some vector graphic programs instead. And in the Adobe suite, Illustrator is the vector graphics. And the difference between vector is, yeah, it's sure you can't do the same kind of pixel to pixel gradation. You can't edit every single pixel in the same way that you can in Photoshop. But when you scale or compress, there's absolutely no loss of quality. And the properties, as opposed to the individual pixels, can be adjusted, which means you can overall affect the image in many kinds of ways using filters and effects and so on. And it's actually a very small size. So a similar image designed in Photoshop might be, say, I don't know, it's 200 megabytes. And I might be able to make a very similar, not to the same, if you go pixel by pixel, not to the same degree, but I could probably mimic it for 10 megabytes in Illustrator. So like 10% of the size of a Photoshop file. So when you're designing lots of images or have little hard drive, limited hard drive space, vector graphics is much preferred. You do have to raster it, so you have to kind of change it from vector format to an image-based format, whether it's JPEG or PNG or TIFF or any other format. There's also an SVG format that you'll see, a scalable vector graphic format that you'll see a lot now on the web that comes from vector graphic design programs. It's very lightweight images that look good and scale to different sizes nicely. So yes, Photoshop is great for organic effects and using many layers up to design a single image that's very, very complex with lots of blend modes and effects and so on. Vector graphics like Illustrator are much better for really crisp as opposed to organic shapes, texts. You can trace images. I use this all the time. So I have a low res image that's royalty free that I designed. Either I designed in Photoshop or I got it off the web that's royalty free or Creative Commons. And I love it, but I want to make it a little bigger. Then you can trace it in Illustrator and turn it into from pixel to vector graphics and be able to scale it up a little bit to make it a little bit bigger. So that's really useful. And I love the multiple artboards function in Illustrator to be able to, in the same file, make many versions of the same image. So I'll actually show you what that looks like. So is anyone here not using Illustrator and not comfortable with Illustrator? Maybe, or are you comfortable? Are you comfortable with Illustrator? Do you want to know more about it? Yes or no is my question here. I can show you a specific example of how I design out using Illustrator if you would like. Can you kind of give me a hands up in chat? Yes or no? Do you want to see a little bit more about Illustrator? Just in a few minutes, nothing terrible, but you'd like to see a little bit more about how I use Illustrator to design images? Yes, no? Neutral, yes? Yes, okay, I got 2 yeses. Okay, so great. So let me pull up Illustrator here. So rather than just a screenshot, and so remember this is CS6. Is everyone now seeing Illustrator on the screen? Yes? Okay, great. So remember this is CS6. It's not Creative Cloud, so it might look a little bit different from what you're used to, or if you have CS4 or 2, it's gonna look a little bit different. So the artboard tool is by far my favorite function in Illustrator. It's this little tool right here, and you can create an artboard to whatever size you want. So let's make this one, I don't know, 900 pixels wide by 900 tall. And then when you click on the artboard tool and select it, right now it's artboard number 19, and it defaults as artboard 23 as the name. So here is the artboard over here on the left-hand side. You have your layers panel, and then you have your artboards panel. Let's see if I can make it a little bit bigger. And so I've got now currently 19 artboards on this in this Illustrator file. And so it's called blank. It is a blank Illustrator file that I have as a template out, and it has all of the sizes that we need, or that I need for Facebook, for Twitter, for LinkedIn, for Instagram, for YouTube. I'm not in Pinterest or any of the others, but we could add different sizes for those. And so I've just kind of added a little bit of text. So the ArtsPond's blog is 900 by 630. This is MCT means MailChimp top, and MCN means MailChimp kind of lower, narrow. So I have 525 height and 475 height. Then Facebook 1230 by 630. Facebook ad is 1200 by 628. Like, why did you make it 628? Why can't you just make it 630 like a Facebook post? Why 2 pixels difference? But sometimes if you're really picky like I am about your visual design and you want to know exactly how it's going to look like, you want to have exactly the right size of an image. And then Facebook cover 820 by 462. Facebook group cover is 640 by 922. Instagram portrait is 1080 by 1350. Instagram square, oh, that's Instagram wide, is 1080 by 566. Square is 1080 by 1080. And then I've got Twitter sizes and then various video sizes. So 720p HD. We've got 1440 QHD size, which is what YouTube uses, and so on. So I can very quickly, and kind of our design has this gray color as the background for a start. So I can quickly draw something and just make it a color. It's going to look terrible because I'm not spending any time thinking about it. So, I would spend better time thinking about design here. But just as one example, so say that's our design and we want to create it for mobile devices, for Twitter, for Facebook, for Instagram and LinkedIn, then all I need to do is copy it. And because it's vector graphics and it will scale or upscale, downscale or upscale with no loss, I can just resize it and copy and paste it into the different contexts. And then the best part of this, the best part is, let's just do a couple more here. The best part is to go File, Export, and let's choose JPEG and use artboards. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop into a new folder here. And let's just call it test. And so it wants to know, one second, I'll pull it over. It wants to know, okay, what color model are we using? Let's put in RGB. And the screen size 72 is fine. I want it to be art optimized instead of type optimized. I want to embed the monitor profile, so the color that I'm seeing will be the same color that anyone else sees. And I don't need it to be too large because it's just a bunch of squares, so I'll put it at a 7. And now it's exporting all of the artwork, all the versions with test in the file name _ the name of the artboard. And so when you are needing to share out for different models, you can very quickly create all of the files rather than having like one file for Twitter, one file for Facebook, and so on, having to keep generating out many different files that are really cumbersome. We can go to, oh, let's not share that just yet. Desktop, new folder, is that it? No, that's not it. It is this one. So it's rendered out all the images here. And there's only a couple that actually have the green, but these are all good now to share out on the web in terms of the different platforms that I need. So Illustrator is really key. It is a lifesaver for me. We have no staff for marketing. Well, we have very little staff for like a daily admin. So I'm like I'm the everything for ArtsMod. I do grants, I do board and governance management, I do graphic and web design, I do social media management. And so I need something that quickly generates all the images, content that I need as quickly as possible. In as efficient a way as possible as well. So I love the artboard function in Illustrator for that. If you don't own Illustrator and you are a not-for-profit, you can go and get like single licenses just for Illustrator at TechSoup for a reduced cost. It is possible to get Adobe software for a little bit cheaper in terms of a license in Creative Cloud for a more affordable price through TechSoup if you're not aware of it. Okay, so that's Illustrator. It took a little bit longer than I thought, but it always does. If you want to know about, okay, what are the sizes of the different platforms, what do they need? Like just search 2020 social media image sizes, and there are a ton of articles out there that will tell you what they are, but here's one at Falcon that I have. I can put it in chat when we have a break. If you want to go and find what all the different sizes are for Pinterest and Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so on. Okay, so let's look at some alternatives to some of the key software for Adobe. If you can't afford Adobe or you don't like Adobe, a bunch of options, and I'll kind of steamroll through these fairly quickly in about 15 minutes. Just talk about them at a high level. And you can go in and experiment with any that might be of interest to you, or if you hadn't heard of them. And then we'll have a break before we dive into the next section. So the biggest, most popular one in terms of trying to replicate everything that Photoshop does is GIMP. And I'm sure most of you have heard of it. If you haven't, it's a good one to go check out. It has a steep, just like Photoshop, it's got a steep learning curve. It is a cross-platform solution, however. So it's available for Windows, for Mac OS, for Linux if you're a Linux geek, and it's available for many other OSs, if in case you're not into the top 3. It's free and it's open source. And so unlike some freemium applications, there's no really annoying rotating ads or displays that, you're trying to design an image, and off in the bottom right hand corner, there's this rotating thing that keeps trying to sell you something, and you can't concentrate on your own images. So even if it's complex, I love GIMP for that. No displays and free. So if you can't afford, you can't get access to Photoshop, try GIMP. It has all the advanced editing, layering, and blending modes, history toolbars, image slicing, various painting and custom brushes and patterns, transformations, color correction, MNG support or Ming support for animations. You can do things like masking and curves, levels, and there's all kinds of plugins to extend it. All the things that you would get out of Photoshop. The UI is very clunky, I think. That's the major drawback. It doesn't look that great, but it's quite powerful. And the UI doesn't also look that great. It's also really cluttered. So it's not that easy to use. So if you're neurodiverse or you can't take a lot of unclear icons, what the heck is that? Then you probably want to avoid GIMP. Adobe is very icon-based as well, but their icons are pretty meaningful, whereas I find GIMP's icons not as meaningful. The sacrifices around GIMP, if you're really a photo editor, there's no camera raw for really like high resolution images. There's no camera raw filtering or editing, and there's few drawing capabilities. Many of you probably found Pixlr is a really popular application for used to be built in HTML in Flash in the web for web browsers. So it works on any platform, but it's now built on HTML5. Flash, if you don't know, isn't actually a very secure technology anymore and is depreciated. I wouldn't encourage building on Flash anymore. So HTML5 it's not the same technology. It's very different technology. It's using something called CSS style sheets to animate and move things around. And so Pixlr is built on HTML5 now. PixLR-X is the most recent version. It's not as advanced as Pixlr is because you can't do the same things with HTML5 that you can with Flash. But there's image transformations, cropping, filtering, layering, blending. You need an internet connection is really the only issue around Pixlr. And there's free and not free kind of versions of it. Paint.net, if you are a Windows person, is Paint, Microsoft Paint, turned into a cloud. It's pretty simple, but it's really powerful in terms of basic editing. It's free. It's Windows-based, unfortunately, but it's really easy to use. Others that you may or may not have heard of, Krita is another cross-platform, so Windows, OS X, and Linux. It's free. It looks very similar to Photoshop. It supports PSD format or Photoshop formats. It offers layering as well, but it doesn't have a camera raw filter. It has no history toolbar, which you're kind of try to keep track of micro edits. That's something you're going to want. And the documentation is apparently, I've not used Krita, but the documentation when I looked at it doesn't look that great. And it's apparently quite slow to use sometimes. So there's some sacrifices there. Sumo Paint is cloud-based and it's free as well. The interface is also quite similar to Photoshop. It's a Flash-based app currently, hasn't made the shift as far as I know to HTML5. So there are some security concerns. There's 300 plus brushes, color pickers, clone stamping, blending effects, but there's no support for Photoshop. I see a question, which one is available for mobiles and which is best? Well, I can't answer which is best because each one is, like I'm trying to outline here, what they are each doing. So you'll be able to reference the recording in terms of my descriptions here. Which is best really depends on what you need. If you need mobile is usually you want something that's web-based. I've not focused my time today for tools on iOS and Android apps. There's a million of them. I've focused on desktop and laptop applications. So I would love to in the future do another one, like Pixlr is available on your app, on your mobile devices. But I've not focused on in this session today around mobile. It's hard to know what devices and what your preferences are, but I can and will do another session in the future through ArtsPond around mobile devices. Okay, I'm sorry about that. I can't meet everybody's needs here. But Sumo Paint has 300 plus brushes, which is awesome in terms of what it does. No, there's a camera raw filter, which Krita doesn't have. Seashore is for Mac. It's free, basic image editing. It has layering and textures, no PSD support. The interface kind of mimics Photoshop, but it's pretty easy to use. So you might want to take a look at that. So that's this one here, Seashore. And then rounding out another cross-platform, Photos Pos Pro for Windows and Mac. It's free. It's pretty novice for novices around graphic design. Photopea is an online photo editor. No need to install software, so it's free. It's compatible against any format. Has native support for PSD, Sketch XD, which is another Adobe platform, SVG, and so on. It does masking, blending, image brightness, sharpening, blurring. There is, however, in the free version, that annoying ads. So user beware. I will never use Photopea because of the ads that are there, supposed to be quite annoying. Pizzap, Canva, Photar, and a shampoo. I've not Pizzap I've used, and Canva I've used a little bit. Photar and a shampoo I've not used personally, but they're recommended by some people and on the web, so you can check them out in terms of alternatives to Photoshop. I use Photoshop. I use GIMP when on some of my other computers because I have a limited number of installations, instances of Photoshop that I can, and I have 9 computers in the office. So I use GIMP as the alternative Photoshop editor for the computers that we can't use Photoshop on. All right, so Inkscape is one of the best cross-platform solutions for vector graphics. So Linux, Windows, OS X, again, vector graphics like Illustrator, it's free and open source. Does everything that Illustrator basically can do. It's a simpler, some people think it's a simpler interface. I don't know if I would agree, but it tries to do as many of the things that Illustrator does. And you can import Illustrator, so A.ai and EPS.EPS PDF files into Inkscape, which is nice. Some other ones that you could look at, Boxy SVG, which is more user-friendly than Inkscape, but there's no free version. It's not open source and it's not free. There's a monthly subscription fee. Vecteezy, Vector, and SVG Edit are other options that you could look at. Most of them are all available on different platforms. I tried to choose ones that are platform agnostic. I used to use InDesign a lot. I've not used InDesign in about 6 years because I find I can mimic most publishing, simple publishing needs in Word. But if you are a complex print publisher and you're looking for some open source options, Scribus is one that's out there. And Lucid Press is another alternative that tries to be affordable that you could look at. Video editing. Okay, so if you're on Mac, many are going to use Mac-based solutions. But if you are an Adobe user and you're looking for some alternatives to Premiere, DaVinci Resolve is a very powerful open source or freeware. It's not open source, sorry, it's freeware. It's a collaborative post-production software supporting online and offline editing video, including 8K video. So not just HD or 4K, but like very high resolution video editing, color correction, visual effects, audio post-production, and visual effects as well. And then there's a whole slew there of mostly free or open source Kdenlive, Shotcut, Lightworks, OpenShot. Filmora is not free, and Film Express I don't think is free either. But if you've not heard of these are ones that might be, if you're looking for some alternatives to Premiere in terms of video editing and video production, video audio production, these are some alternatives. Not many people are using After Effects unless you are like a media film artist, but I find Blender kind of fun to play with. It's an open source project. And Natron I've not used recently, but it's an alternative in terms of animated effects to video that you could look at. Audio, so Audition. If you are doing video editing or audio editing, sorry, and you need free sources, you've probably already heard of Audacity. It's an open source project. It is the standard outside in terms of low cost and free. It's the standard project. It does everything you need around audio recording and session recording and so on with multiple sources. Some other ones that are out there that may be useful. I've not necessarily previewed all of these, but they've been recommended by some folks to me and in the community in general. Ocean Audio, Ashabhu's, Music Studio 2020, Audio Tool, and Acoustica's from Acon Digital are kind of free or freeware or open source alternatives out in the community. In terms of online collaboration, many of you are probably using Google solutions, whether it's a real-time board earlier or more recently Jamboard, and we talked about those a little bit in the first session. But if you're looking for some more alternative whiteboard solutions that are a bit more robust and offer a bit more collaborative tools, I use Miro currently. There's some pretty good free accounts for these. These are not open source, but they all have good free in terms of, okay, like 4 accounts or four users or 4 boards as free. And then if you need more than that, then you have to pay. But so Miro and Mural. When people are talking about those two, okay, which one are you talking about? Mural or Miro? You have to enunciate them clearly. And Whimsical and Lucid Spark are kind of round out the top 4 in terms of whiteboard. So just like an endless white space that you can collaboratively create and share content on. Those are your options. A few other things before we go to a bit of a break. In terms of graphic design, there are so many template libraries out there, but so I just pulled a few together as examples. If you are the design aesthetic out there currently, and for the last 2 years really, has been very flat design. I think in part because of the proliferation of different kinds of platforms and wanting to have lightweight and high good visual quality images. The shift has really gone from pixel-based to vector graphics, which means flat design. So like originally you think when people first started talking about flat design, you think, well, okay, if you aren't a developer, you think, oh, it's just in a design aesthetic. to have, instead of lots of visual effects, have like a bunch of flat spaces. The real reason for it, from my perspective, it has nothing to do with an artistic aesthetic. It is because of the need for high quality images that can scale to all these different channels in low bandwidth that don't take up a lot of space. So Illustrator over Adobe, and you can't do high quality pixel based stuff in Illustrator, so it means you need flat design. So it's practical rather than artistic, but it is really a combination of both. So icons, having access, you see a lot of icons out there in terms of, oh, click here and you see like the gear icon or the people group icon or the newsletter icon or the email icon. And Font Awesome is one of the best in terms of being able to access that library from your website and just choose the one and have it there, scale it to any size, change the color, and so on. So it's not a solid image. It's a vector graphic image that can be changed in its size or color by the software, the website solutions that are using them. So Font Awesome is my favorite. Others are Bootstrap and Typo and Typicons to look at. Many of you, I'm sure, are already using Google Fonts in terms of your software design. The thing about what's happening, so software is going online, but fonts are also going online. Used to be that you could only, unless you turned your website into pages, like into images, you couldn't use more than like 15 fonts. Arial, Georgia, Calibri, I think, is available now online. But it used to be, even just 5 years ago, a limited number of fonts that you could use on your websites. But now with Google Fonts and a bunch of other repositories, the font information is available on the web, and your website can embed those fonts into your website. So you have endless number, like there's literally hundreds, but possibly thousands of fonts that you can access now live on your website just by embedding the font information from fonts at google.com or using a plugin to help you choose those fonts. And they're free or very low cost to be able to access that. So Google Fonts is one of the best in terms of the most options out there. Open Foundry and Font Library are others. If you're looking for images, if you haven't heard of Unsplash, it's kind of taken over in the last couple of years. It used to be Flickr, and in terms of, and even Yahoo used to be one of the leaders of repositories of royalty-free and Creative Commons images. But Unsplash is really starting to take over in an interesting way. There's lots of really high quality images available there for free that's either royalty free or Creative Commons free. You can search Flickr for Creative Commons and royalty free images to use in your designs as well. But Unsplash, I find the quality is really resonant with what many people are looking for. Pixabay, Burst, Pexels, Kaboom Pix are some other ones. And if you've never heard of open culture, if you just want to kind of keep track of the idea of knowledge and resources around free, open source, Creative Commons tools, resources, I recommend you visit Open Culture once a month and read up on some of their articles to get, like, you'll find, for example, when an art gallery or a university releases a repository of free images for transformation, Open Culture is usually one of the first to share that out. So I find it a good place to go find other things that are emerging in terms of free audiobooks, free content, and so on. So sharing. So we've designed some content, whether it's mostly like all of the digital assets. We've designed those assets, and now we need to get them out there to our publics. How do we do that? What tools help us with that? So there are lots. And I'd say there are three kinds of strategies so the top line, WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, Magento, Typo3, MediaWiki, these in my mind are like the top ones. And what those ones do is, except for like WordPress has 2 versions. So the top line is, oh, you download the code and you put it on your own server. So you have bought a hosting plan. WordPress also has WordPress.com, which allows you to do a hosted version where you go WordPress.com/myname, and there's the same version. So WordPress has both, but all these others require you to download the code and install it on your host, on your server. And we'll talk about servers and hosts in a minute. The second line are, oh, and about the top line too, is like, okay, you have to design the content. There are lots of helpful plugins and so on to help you, but really it's, okay, this is like the core of a public website, and you've got to create all decide what plugins you want to add in and manage the code, kind of the code, not the code itself, but manage the functioning, the day-to-day updates and so on of the website content. The second tier here, so starting at Wix all the way over to Constant Contact, tries to get rid of that needing to support the day-to-day administration and offering like a drag and drop interface. Although the top tier you can do drag and drop design too. But the second one is, okay, there's no day-to-day maintenance on the hosting of the website. You just design content and away it goes. And MailChimp recently launched a website builder, and Constant Contact, I think, has had one for a while. So if you're already a MailChimp subscriber in terms of your newsletter, MailChimp, I think, is the best of the free for free accounts. It offers, I think, the best solutions for newsletter management and contact management. But so if you need a free website, it's possible to put a free website up with MailChimp. It's possible to put a free website up through Constant Contact. And there's no need to know any code. It's all a drag and drop interface. And there's no day-to-day maintenance around the website. You just put the content up and that's it. And then the third tier are software solutions, some paid, like Shopify is now Canada's most profitable company, or worth the most. Largely because of the pandemic. It was worth more than the Royal Bank, like $128 billion or something. In terms of financial services, it's worth a lot of money now. And it's not cheap to use Shopify, but if you need e-commerce support, then Shopify, BigCommerce, Square are some of the larger ones out there. Some of you maybe are using Stripe. Like I put the ones that you maybe don't know. Well, you probably know about Shopify, but like everyone I think knows about Stripe. So I make some choices about what to put here. WooCommerce, there are open source versions of it, and you can actually use I use a plugin, a free plugin of WooCommerce into WordPress itself. So there are multiple versions of WooCommerce, and some of the non-free ones are actually kind of expensive. But it's up there in terms of the best offerings. If you're a not-for-profit and you need credit card processing, there's a very large field of payment processors out there, and we could have a whole nother session just about that. But I decided to include the one I'm using. ArtsPond uses IATS payments, which comes out of Ticketmaster, and it's a very reduced rate for not-for-profits. And I've discovered recently some other ones that are actually just a little bit cheaper and are actually Canadian. So that's why I'd like to, like in the future, have a whole session just about payment processing, because I've found a better one. But I'm happy with it. It's a very low rate in terms of the payment processing fee, like the percentage is very low. It's under 3%, whereas many of these others like Shopify, it's more than 4% usually. And the per transaction, it's a monthly fee. It's $10 a month, as opposed to 30 cents per transaction for many of these other platforms, or 35 or 50 cents, some of them charge. And we have someone in the waiting room, Victoria. The challenge, and that's where some of these platforms make their money. So you want to look at the per transaction fee Is it 30% and then, or 30 cents or 50 cents or more? If it's more than 30 cents, not sure it's a good buy for your money. That's where they're making their money, is the amount they're charging per transaction and the amount they're charging as a percentage of the transaction fee. So whether it's 3%, 4%, 5, 6%, if it gets more than 3%, 4% in the current market, I would look at finding another solution. And then there's obviously platforms like Patreon that are not in this list in terms of like trying to raise money. I didn't go there yet with this talk, but we can have another one looking at Patreon and other kinds of options. But I assumed most of you would know about Patreon in terms of an option out there if you're looking for trying to sell work and raise money for your work in terms of commerce that way. Patreon and Etsy, and there's lots of shops out there. Many of them were on if you saw that the first logo field that I shared on that first slide with all those logos, there are lots of e-commerce ones there for different disciplines in terms of options. So you can look at the shared PDF to see if there's any there that are appropriate. And the biggest challenge is that how much are they charging on processing fees? That's where the money is. That's where they make their money. That's where it's profitable. And that's why Shopify is worth so much, because so many people, the whole economy needed to shift to online payments, online selling. So Shopify is making the money. Their system runs itself, and more people that are selling, the more they make. The challenge with Wix and Squarespace and Weebly, like if you have no design, no interest in managing a website, and no technical knowledge at all, they do make it easy for you. But there's all kinds of sacrifices if you start looking at the privacy statements. And if you want to leave these platforms and move somewhere else, there are all kinds of sacrifices that you're going to have to make. Like that they own your content, or it's not clear if when you delete, does it permanently delete off their platform, or can they continue to use your images? And how much they charge is often a little too high compared to hosting a website of your own. It's significantly more expensive. And the kinds of drag and drop options that you can have in terms of what the website looks like are also not you can't customize it as much. And it's that much harder to have, your own domain. So if you want myname.com, it's much harder to do that with some of these platforms. So you have to decide. So I wanted for Artsbond as much customization as possible and as little cost as possible. So I chose from the top rung. I chose WordPress. I had a Drupal in the first few years. And the difference between WordPress and Drupal is really where they originally came from. WordPress was a blog software only in its early days, and Drupal in its early days was a community engagement, forums, and trying to sell it in directories and so on, software solution only. And they're both free and have open source solutions, so you can download the code and do whatever you want with them. That's where they started. And then there's just that realization for both that, okay, Drupal, we need people want blogs and portfolios, and we don't have that currently. So they started to add that, but it was clunky in the early days. And WordPress, similarly, they wanted, blog users wanted to build out a community. So lots of developers started developing free and premium, so you have to charge, plugins to WordPress and Drupal. And in the middle was Joomla. Joomla was a fork from another open source project, and Mambo was its name. And Mambo isn't really used anymore. Joomla was a fork, so they took the code and decided, okay, we're going to use the Mambo open source code and improve it. And so Joomla became its own project. And there's still about 2% of all websites in the world are Joomla websites. But something like, I forget the number, but it's like 30%, I think, or 25% of, I can go and find the stats and share them afterwards, after the workshop, what the actual stats are. But something like 25% of public websites are WordPress websites. And then Drupal is a little bit lower. The main difference, if you're trying to decide between these three, is WordPress strives to be quite easy. And all the developers that have come have prioritized WordPress because it's easier. It's easier to manage day to day for a beginner who doesn't know anything about websites. Drupal is more, and so WordPress, because it's easier, isn't as powerful, but the number of additional plugins that have been developed, there's like 52,000 or more plugins, and many of the vast majority of them are free or have free versions. So there's a very large repository of plugins that extend the functionality of the core software for WordPress. So it's actually very robust now, but it's still, its aesthetic is to try to be easy to use. Whereas Drupal is, in its earlier days, was powerful, and because it's powerful, a little bit more actually not even a little bit, quite a bit cumbersome to use. They have made a lot of improvements, and so Drupal 8 is so much better than 6 and 7 in terms of its ease of use. But still, I started out with Drupal because I thought, like ArtsPond, we were going to be a community organization, but there weren't as many themes available to design the website. They weren't updated very frequently or as frequently. And I was just struggling with like I'm a web designer. I was struggling with some of the functionality day to day. So I abandoned Drupal and moved to WordPress. If you want to do a blog or a portfolio site, WordPress, I would suggest WordPress, or like if you want something that's relatively free and customizable, I would go to WordPress. If you don't know anything about websites, then you may want to look at some of the purchase services. And I've not gone here in all of those today because there's so many of them, and we could do another talk about those. But I would go to WordPress, and you could go to WordPress.com and create a new account, and you can add plugins and extend it all on WordPress.com for free. It's a little bit harder to have a customized web address there. So you're going to have to send people to WordPress.com. But it is possible to do almost everything that you can do, like about 65 or 70% of what you can do with the WordPress when you download it, you can do with the WordPress.com version of it. So I would consider looking at that as an approach, okay? But it's very personal. It's going to be like you're going to have to look at them for yourself, and if you're going to maybe need some help in making the decisions. But at least I'm trying to inform you at a high level what some of the factors are in trying to decide about these. Joomla is in the middle between WordPress and Drupal. It was built on different technology, and it's trying to find a middle place between ease and power. From the Drupal perspective and the WordPress perspective. I looked at Drupal, a Joomla story quite extensively about 4 years ago, and I decided against it personally, but it might be if you want something that's not as simple as WordPress and a little bit more powerful, but not as difficult as Drupal, then Joomla may be the right fit. There is a smaller developer community for Joomla, so there are a smaller number of themes and plugins available for free compared to WordPress and Drupal. WordPress and Drupal are really the top two. Magento got bought up by Adobe. So Adobe owns Magento now, and I think I'm not sure if they've stopped it, but Magento was originally an open source e-commerce platform. And I'm not sure if they have stopped developing the open source or if they intend to eventually make further editions available. But for a long time, it was one of the best options for if you needed a fairly robust e-commerce solution for free. Magento, I guess, is one of the options there. If you don't like WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal, Typo3 is another content management system. All of these top tiers are CMSs, content management systems. That's what website CMS means, content management system. Typo3 is another content management system, and its aesthetic is completely different. It's very unique compared to WordPress, Joomla, and Drupal. I keep wanting saying now I can't say Joomla instead of Joomla and Drupal. I'm tired. Sorry about that. Its aesthetic is very different, and it's the kind of, as a result, the look of it is very different. It's another open source project. I looked at it and I tried to use it for a while just to see if I wanted to use it, but I couldn't quite get past the learning curve for me personally. But it may be the right fit for you. Like if you're kind of an outsider and think differently and want your website to look a little bit different compared to everyone else, because most WordPress and Drupal websites, you can, once you have some experience with them, you can tell it's a WordPress site or a Drupal site. So if you want your kind of ecology to look different from the vast majority, Typo 3 might be something for you. If you kind of have tons of information that you want to share, like a wiki, then MediaWiki is one of the best options in terms of free and open source. It's difficult to make it look good. You have to probably hire a designer to give you a template for customizing the look of it. But out of the gate, it's there's also Wikipedia. There's a code repository to do Wikipedia version, but MediaWiki is one that offers a bit more support for images and just kind of looks a little bit different in terms of wiki. So if you like Wikipedia and you have tons of content and you want users to contribute to, then MediaWiki is maybe for you. So I'd like to talk about web
question in the chat, and it's in the top tier. Which one would you use for artist portfolio site? I find WordPress too heavy in overhead.
Yeah, so I said that I would use WordPress. So I did answer that question. So I would say I would use WordPress for a portfolio site, whether it's the WordPress. So yeah, so WordPress.com, if you go there, it's going to be less buggy because it'll be a little bit lighter weight and easier to update. If you're going to use WordPress.com or WordPress download and put it on your server, or on your host, yeah, you've got to update it. You've got to know a little bit about and learn about some website management. And if you don't, you're going to have some challenges and bugs. So through the walkthroughs, in session 3 and 4, we're going to learn about how to actually manage create a WordPress website on a new host and manage it day to day to give you some insights, and then you'll have to go and read and learn more. But the thing about WordPress is if you have a problem and you just type that question, there's an answer somewhere, because almost everyone has had that same problem. So it does take a little bit of learning, but like, okay, how to fix Wix or something, it's not always there. So yes, WordPress can be very buggy if you don't keep it up to date and if you don't learn to grow with it. But if you do spend that little time, then it can be awesome. And then we're going to talk about yes, we're going to talk about, I'm not going to talk Bluehost and DreamHost. Yeah, are some of them. I'm going to tell you the ones that I think are the best in Canada with Canadian hosting. Next. And then we're going to talk a little bit about some insights around using WordPress and some of the best plugins that I like. And I know that other people like in terms of if you want to go forward with WordPress, and then in the next sessions we'll look at actually using them in actual reality. So when we think about web hosting, there's a couple of different kinds of web hosting you need to be aware of, and there's shared hosting all the way up to dedicated hosting, and so shared hosting is the cheapest, and dedicated hosting is the most expensive. So it can be shared hosting can be anywhere from like $2 a month to dedicated hosting at $600 or $700, $800, $1,000 a month. Really depends on what you need. So shared hosting is the idea of somewhere in a server farm somewhere, and ideally it's a server farm located in Canada. There are a bunch of computers and a bunch of hard drives. And the shared hosting is the idea that a bunch of people that aren't connected to each other are sharing that network of computers and hard drives to reduce the cost, so you don't have to have a full server all by yourself. So if a server costs $600, like a dedicated server, which means only you have code on it, and anytime anyone visits your website, only visitors to your website are visiting and using that computer, that server that's hosting the information. So you have complete control over it. It just means if you like Netflix and Microsoft, they're using dedicated servers, many, hundreds, thousands of them. But shared hosting, okay, we take that $600 a month for one dedicated server, and we split it amongst 100 or 200 different users, and they'll probably charge. So if we divide 600 by 100, you'd think they would charge $60 each. No, they're going to charge $100 because they're going to make money doing that. But a shared host, usually one server can manage between, it depends on how much content, but between, let's say, 12 and 100 visitors simultaneously. So if you have more than 100 visitors, and sometimes you go to a website, right, and it breaks, that means they don't have enough servers that are making their website available. So when you have shared hosting, if you're going to have more than like 500 visits a day, you might want to look at increasing your plan in terms of not just a basic shared hosting, but a premium hosting plan. Virtual private server hosting is just a little bit more expensive than shared hosting. It's still essentially shared hosting, but it's trying to give you a bit more control and mimic what a dedicated server can do. So the difference between a shared host and a dedicated host can host different kinds of software solutions like Python, that a shared host is usually not permitted. So you can have very complex solutions on a dedicated host in terms of code. Where a shared host, it's usually just basic, like a Joomla or WordPress website. PHP is what these solutions are built on. So virtual private server tries to give you the benefit of what a dedicated host can do in terms of more kinds of code that you can offer, which is more interactive with your users, but isn't as expensive as dedicated hosting. Cloud hosting, if you have a lot of content, like you have a lot of videos, for example, that are high bandwidth, so like a terabyte each, then Netflix, for example, uses cloud hosting for all of its videos. And then it might use dedicated hosting for its interface. So all of your content is in the cloud, and it's accessed on a user basis. Whenever it's needed, there's a download of it. As opposed to a shared host, you usually have about maybe a gig or 2 gigabytes of storage space, so not a lot. And as you can then pay more, 10 gigabytes or a terabyte of storage space on your server. But if and that's not like if a video is a terabyte, then that's going to fill up your entire hard drive space. So that's when you need to go to cloud hosting, is you can have your shared host, and then all of your content is in a cloud host. So you need both. ArtSpawn is not yet at the point where we need a dedicated host, but our software platform, Arts United and Hatch Open, that we're building will need to be on a dedicated host. And so we're going to be having to probably pay $600 or $1,000 a month when those are out there, as opposed to our shared. We have kind of the maximum account that we can get for shared hosting. We haven't gone to virtual private server yet, but we've got the maximum available in shared hosting. It's meeting our needs, but it's costing us about $120 a month, thereabouts. With security certificates and extra storage space and so on. Like all in about actually it's probably only about $100 a month. Okay, so and most of you won't need that much. We need that much because we have 6 websites that I'm trying to host, so not just one. So it just means we need more space. So in Canada, these are some of the top 2 lines. There are some of the hosting organizations that have been rated as the top tier. And as you go from HostPapa all the way down to SiteGround and Kingsta, that's like from shared hosting to dedicated hosting. So SiteGround and Kingsta are some of the best rated for dedicated hosting. Many of these do all the forms of shared hosting, but HostPapa, Hostinger, Bluehost, DreamHost. I know many people are on DreamHost, but it's actually, I think it's not a Canadian. I could be completely wrong, but I haven't used DreamHost in a long time. Many of my clients have used DreamHost, but I don't think it's Canadian. Your data is not stored in Canada; it's stored in the United States or elsewhere. Like many people use GoDaddy, for example, but it's a US company. And so your data is being stored in the United States. And that's not something you always want to do. So HostPapa, Hostinger, Bluehost, and HostGator are some of the top ones for just basic shared hosting, $3 a month for basic shared hosting. Another that I haven't yet mentioned is not hosting, but just a web domain that you can have it automatically refer to another domain. So say you have a WordPress website, wordpress.com, and you still want to have myname.ca. Then you can go to one of these companies and just buy the domain name, myname@.ca, and then whenever someone puts in that domain, it auto refers to Wix or Weebly or Squarespace or WordPress.com, wherever you want. And those are it's like $9 a year. If often like the first time you buy a .ca domain, it could be like $3 if it's not in demand. Like ArtsPond is kind of simple, so we had to pay $9. But something like Your Name that not very many other people are going to want, you could probably get it for $2 or $3 for a whole year. And then use a free service and just have that domain when everyone calls it move to where your other site actually resides. Okay, so those are some to look at. There are even some free web hosting out there. So Webhost and one.com, they try to be like a host that charge you, that essentially are nothing in terms of like there's no cost. But there's some hidden costs to them. There's always hidden costs. So you're gonna have to pay something for them, but they're still quite free. So you could take quite affordable. So you could take a look at them and see if they meet your needs. There's a lot of them out there. Just search free website hosting, but a lot of them, some of them are sketchy, like really sketchy in terms of privacy and security. So those two, 000 web host, like that's a weird name, but 000 web host and one.com are some of the best rated ones out there. But I don't know, buyer beware. All right, so I'd like to, we've got a question here. New emerging arts looking to create a first-time website. Would you recommend shared hosting over dedicated hosting? Yeah, so you only need a dedicated host if you're building a software, like a custom software solution, and you're gonna have not like 5,000 users a month, but 50,000 users a month. Then you might want to have a dedicated host. You don't need to go to dedicated hosting if you just want a basic website with like ArtsPond. We get about, we get about 300 visitors a day. And so it's more than enough for shared hosting. So if you think, okay, 300 visits a day, which isn't bad. We used to be 20 to 50, 75 visitors a day. So we're getting a lot more than we used to. But 300 visitors a day, let's see if I can do the math in my head here. You're going to see how bad I am. But what I would do, if you have 300 visitors per day, then there's 12 hours, like from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. So divide 300 by 12, and that's how many visitors per hour. And then what we're concerned about for your what kind of hosting plan you need is how many simultaneous users are you going to have on your website. And a shared host can manage, and if it's simple content, if you're watching videos and so on, then it's going to be a problem. But if it's a basic website with text and some images, then you can probably handle up to 100 75 quite easily simultaneous users on a shared host. But if you have lots of videos that aren't hosted by YouTube or Vimeo, and they're hosted on your website or audio recordings, and you're going to have more than 100 simultaneous people wanting to watch that all at the same time, then you might want to bump up to a virtual private server or a dedicated server if you really think you're what you need. But I would talk with the host, the hosting provider, and say, these are my needs, and they will make a good recommendation for you. Okay. We're not yet at a dedicated server. Really, I think most people in the art sector won't need a dedicated server unless you're really trying to have tons of content and you have like tens of thousands of visitors per day. Okay. We have any other questions? I have a lot of video content. Do I get additional cloud hosting or just link a Vimeo or a YouTube account? Yeah, so when you have video, I would always put it somewhere else. So not on your website, put it on, so Vimeo and YouTube are the two. Part of it is you want to be discoverable, not just because not everyone's going to know about your website in the early days. So Vimeo and YouTube, there's a community of people looking for videos, so you might be discovered and found. But if you really want to have it on your own, like if you just want it to be your own platform and on your own site and not on YouTube, then you can look at cloud hosting for the content and search. I haven't included any in my talk today, but there are some open source web players that you could input and embed into your software, into your WordPress or whatever, that would access that video and play it for you. It's not going to have the same streamlined experience as YouTube or Vimeo, but it is possible. And I'm actually going to talk about one solution funded by the Digital Strategy Fund that kind of allows you to do that. Have an alternative, not YouTube, not Vimeo, player of all of your video content. So it is possible. Okay. So I'd like to talk about my kind of network and just show you what our solution looks like. So we have shared hosting, and most shared hosting is powered by an open source, so that like the hosting provider, whether it's DreamHost or HostPapa or whatever, they will install an instance of this open source solution called CPAMO, and that will allow you to administer your website and install things and look at analytics and create emails and so on. So if you've never, how many of you, yes, just if you could put in chat, how many of you are interested in creating your own website but have never done it, like on a host, and you've never heard of cPanel? How many of you are not there yet? I just want to make sure that I don't go somewhere that isn't interesting for the vast majority of you. Yeah, what is cPanel? Okay, so there's one person who doesn't know. Okay, yeah, anyone else? Are you all interested in like leaving Wix or leaving WordPress.com and potentially hosting your own website on a host somewhere? Are you interested in this? If not, I will skip over it very briefly. At least one of you is interested. So I've got a no. Is one more person interested? Yes? Okay, we've got at least 2 people interested. So I will do a little bit, maybe like 7 or 8 minutes, not too long. So we have WordPress. You can download the code. We installed the open source free software of WordPress on our host. I'm not going to tell you what host I have. And our host, so this is what the back end of our host looks like. It is a cPanel dashboard. And so almost every host, cPanel is pretty much the standard. So it doesn't cost the host provider anything because it's free, it's open source. So it's a back-end administration software solution for you, the user, to allow you to manage your hosting plan. So somewhere in the world there is a computer, somewhere in Canada there's a computer and a hard drive that this cPanel is accessing through the web, and it's allowing me to upload content so there's a file managed there. There's an FTP file transfer protocol, so I can set up an FTP account to allow me to upload content to that server. I can also use the file manager itself. There's something called phpMyAdmin, which allows you to manage the databases. So we haven't talked about databases yet, but WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, all of these websites have your content editors, like creating content, and then there's a database that manages all of that. And those databases are normally in a platform called MySQL, which is an open source data platform. And phpMyAdmin is another open source software solution, so free, to allow you to manage MySQL databases. So when you create a WordPress website, you upload the code for WordPress, but you also have to create a database, and all of your content and your text and your images get stored in that database. And WordPress calls on that. So you'll be able to use PHP. You don't really need to, for day-to-day, you don't need to manage the database very much at all. I look at it maybe once a year. Just to change the name or make a backup, and that's pretty much it. So you don't really need to know about phpMyAdmin, but this is one of the solutions that is there. The other one that I use a lot is Stats, which is like Google Analytics. It tells you who your how many visitors you have, what pages they're visiting, how many downloads there are, what their IP addresses are, so what parts of the world they're coming from, and so on. For example, we go to File Manager here, and so you're going to see a little bit of the back end. And Victoria, I don't mind if this is public. There's anything I'll mention. Oh, can you please white this out when it gets shared in YouTube? I will mention it so you can flag it. But so far, everything is good in terms of sharing publicly. Okay, so this is the whole server. So there's all kinds of folders like MySQL backups and like Spam Assassin. It's stuff that comes with cPanel in terms of different software solutions, but it's not your website yet. This is the computer that is managing and maintaining your server. So you want to go to a folder called public HTML, and this is your website now. This is all the code, the pages, all the files that are managing your website. So if you just go to public HTML, that is your root domain. Now I have a shared host with lots of rooms, so we have multiple websites. My personal website, agila.ca, artsy.ca, digitalaso.ca, groundstory.ca, hub.digitalaso.ca, ilostmygig.ca are all different websites, and they have their own folders where the same instances, or not the same, but WordPress is installed again in each of those folders, and that's where those websites are. So I can manage multiple websites at a time. But if you have just one website, then it's just in the root folder of public HTML. And that's all. This is all the code that comes with WordPress, or with Drupal. It's a different site. You may notice a lot when you can find out if it's a WordPress website when you download content. You'll usually see like, okay, like artspawn.com/wp-content/ and then like 2020 and then all the image information. That's because all of your images are stored in WP content uploads, and then by year and date and month and so on. So if you look at the detailed full hyperlinks, you'll be able to see whether it's a WordPress site or not by seeing that folder, WP content. You can change that folder destination if you want, but most people don't bother. That's how you can find out if it's a WordPress site or not. Okay, so let's look at, so that's just a little bit about the back end. I would like to show you quickly, before I go to the website itself, what Stats looks like. You choose we have many domains, including SSL site certificates versions of websites and non-SSL. So I'll look at ArtsPond with a security certificate. And it gives, you can give, so you see like roughly almost 3,000 visits a month. Up to, well, it's actually, so I lied, it's 200. I was over ambitious when I said 300 visits a day. It's more like 200 visits a day on average. And so you get the daily visits, and you can see days of the week, how many pages and hits, and the bandwidth, hours. You can see what countries they're coming from. You can see all their IP addresses. So I'm going to skip past that one because we don't want that one to be public to anybody. You can see how long they're visiting your website for. You can see what types of files they're downloading. You can see the various files specifically that they're downloading, what pages they're visiting, what browsers and operating systems they're using, to get a sense, and various linkages out to other websites and so on. So it's pretty, like, in terms of basic information, this is what I use. You could also use Google Analytics, but I choose to use this one for various reasons in terms of analyzing your day-to-day. So that's kind of a little bit on that. Let's look at the website, the actual website. I thought I opened it. Oh, I did open it. It's over there. So 1 second. I forgot to mention it's Installatron. So actually Installatron is, so let's go back. Installatron is awesome. If you don't know anything, if you don't really want to know anything about how to install WordPress, if you're really not interested in that, then it comes with cPanel usually, but not always. You want to look for Installatron. Where is it here? I'm just going to search for it. I think it's right at the top. There it is, Installatron. It is it's usually provided by most hosting plans. So it is an assistive tool to help you install free open source projects. And there are a whole bunch in here. I wouldn't necessarily suggest using many of them. I've given you the best one so far, but if you ever do get your own website hosting plan, you might want to experiment. So there's Typo 3, WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. So if you can, rather than having to learn how to install it yourself, you can use Installatron to install the WordPress or Drupal for you, and it'll manage updates and so on as well. So Installatron is awesome, and there's all these, usually gives you access to all kinds of different software that you want to play with. You might want to play with in the future. Okay, so then let's look at WordPress quickly itself. Where did that go? 1 second. There it is. So I've logged into the back end of our WordPress website here at ArtsPond. And again, there's nothing here that I don't mind anyone seeing, Victoria. Log in, and we go over here to ArtsPond, which is, if it's your website, it'll be whatever you call it. And you can go to your dashboard. And we will do a full run through in session 4, I think, around websites and using WordPress. So I'm not going to do very much right now, but just to get a sense of it, like things like using updates. So if you have lots of plugins installed, you just go to updates and click update. And that's really all you need to do for major maintenance in terms of keeping things secure. And I have some recommendations for a bunch of plugins that are my favorites that you could install on your WordPress instance to extend and help you out with your stuff. And basically down on the left-hand side, they just get, in terms of navigation, they get entered. But it's very easy right at the top to create a new post, to add new media, to create a new page. A portfolio comes with a theme that I bought. So I can create a new portfolio item. I have a testimonials plugin to share out feedback from the community. Those sliders that you see across the top of many web pages. Engage slider. Engage is the name of the theme I have, so there's a slider that comes with it. Very easy to create content. The one thing that is the most tricky around WordPress is when you go to you have your website. So I'm going to right click here on visit website. The one thing that's tricky, and Drupal is actually worse, it's much harder to figure out how to use it, is figuring out how to get your navigation working, whether it's a top, left, right navigation, and to get your footer, all of your footer stuff down here working properly and setting them up. So where you go for that is down, it's hidden down here in appearance and widgets. Widgets is where your footer work happens, and appearance menus is where you create your menus. So we'll walk through all of that in the detailed, but just a little bit of a sense of what it actually looks like. In terms of WordPress, I'm a big fan. If you want to upload content, so to your, well, if you want, you are going to be uploading content, you can, especially if you want to, add a new entire folder and you don't want to use the WordPress interface, you're going to want an FTP client, file transfer protocol client. And the best one that I know of that works on Mac and Windows, and it's free, is CyberDuck. So you can download that, and I can demonstrate it quickly here. See if I have, basically what it does is it allows you to see on your local computer a version of your server. Yeah. So here's the version of the public, if you remember, public HTML is the local version of ArtsPond's space. So this is the public HTML folder. And now I can drag and drop into this folder or remove, delete files on the website, just into this window. So I don't need to log into the website if I want to add some content. So you need to customize things or whatever, it's useful. All right, so let's extend WordPress. Some of my favorite places to go to make WordPress that much better. The first thing you're going to want is a theme. The themes that come built in with WordPress, there's a new theme every year. So there's a WordPress theme 2020, 2019, 2018, 2017, so on. And they're free, and when you install WordPress the first time, those themes are there. So you can use those out of the box. They look good for a simple website, but often I've always wanted to do something a little bit more robust and have a little bit more control. So where you go to find themes, so just search like WordPress themes and you're going to get thousands of websites and personal developers. My favorite place to go currently is ThemeForest. For finding WordPress and Drupal themes. They can cost anywhere between $5 and $10 for something that's not that great, to up to about $70 or $80 to something that's actually very good. On average, if you have a fairly robust site and you want to have like a portfolio or e-commerce, or you want support for like drag and drop interface and so on, I would look at spending about $59 or $60 US to buy a theme. If you spend less than that, you're probably going to regret it. I wouldn't spend $100. I wouldn't spend $250. There's some they're scams and they're charging $2,000 for a theme that's crap. So you got to watch out. But so somewhere between $40 and $75 US is kind of the going rate for a good to a robust theme. And you can just search ThemeForest. You need to become a member. ThemeForest is a part of a company called Envato, so envato.com, and they have a whole bunch of different resources. So if you want logos or you want Photoshop templates and so on, there's a whole bunch of websites for them. And ThemeForest is specific for content management systems. So once you have WordPress installed and you have it looking like what you want, and as the ThemeForest one that we chose is called Engage, so you could look at it, search for Engage WordPress theme and see if you like it. Once you've got it installed, you're going to want to have some administration tools to support you with your day-to-day functionality, security. So Jetpack is one solution, free, comes from WordPress itself, that bundles a whole bunch of general administration tools. Works well for WordPress.com, works well if you have it on your own host. My preference is not to use Jetpack. I've found a bunch of other ones that I prefer, but if you only install one administrative tool to support your security and day-to-day administration, I would install Jetpack and you'll get lots of different functionalities through it. To extend beyond Jetpack, and some of these are offered by Jetpack, but Yoast SEO is amazing. And I would like to actually show it to you if we have time today, but I don't think we're going to. So we'll learn all about it in the walkthrough one on the last day. What do we call that? What are we calling the hands-on? In the hands-on, we'll learn what Yoast is. Site engine optimization is what Yoast is, Yoast SEO. Site engine optimization, if you've never heard of it, hopefully you have heard of it by now because it's been around for about 15 to 20 years. But if you've not heard of it, the idea of site engine optimization is that you create content, but then you want various site engines like Google that are crawling the web trying to find your content. You want your website to be optimized for these various engines that are searching for things called My Awesome Website or My Awesome Performing Arts Event. You want to be discoverable. So there's all this metadata that needs to be stored with the website, and that kind of management of that day-to-day metadata has been traditionally called for the last 15 years or so, site engine SEO, site engine optimization. So an example of SEO that we see currently is you post, and actually I think it's useful if I just kind of show you for those that don't come to the hands-on. I'll just quickly show you what that means. So you post a blog article on your website. So let's go to one on my website here. We go to so I'm gonna visit the website. And we're gonna go to a post. So the size of my blog images default at 900 by 630 pixels. So let's look at this one. But Twitter is 1200 by 630. And, Facebook is 1200 by 630, not 900 by 630. And Twitter used to be 1200 by 675, not 1200 by 630. But now they'll kind of accept 1200 by 630, but it's not always perfect. So you have there's all these different sizes. So you want to use an SEO program, site engine optimization, to publish out, when you share a link on a website, from a website to Facebook, there's that preview image and there's a link down below that's an appropriate size. And sometimes you'll see a website where like the logo is way too big. It's not the appropriate size because they haven't set up SEO for this post for the different streams channels that are out there. So if I edit this post, we'll see a plugin option for Yoast SEO, which is free. Down below here, Yoast SEO. And under social, it's a little bit slow. Under social here, we can customize the Facebook image and customize the Twitter image, as well as the title and the description, because Facebook allows more than Twitter does in terms of the text and the description. So sometimes you need to customize those things. And then you can add, with SEO, so you can add keywords to describe what this article is about so that it's more discoverable on the web. There's something new called open link data on the semantic web. That's new technology, and I'm going to talk briefly about it at the end of today's session. That's going beyond, sorry, I hit my microphone. That's going beyond SEO, and it's the new kind of approach into the future. But for now, SEO is still accepted and a way of working. But 15 years in the future, I think SEO will be abandoned, and open link data will be the way of the future. So we'll have to get up to speed eventually. But for now, SEO is the way things are. Okay, so that's just a little bit about Yoast. A problem with many WordPress websites, as you add more plugins to extend it, is it becomes heavy and it slows down in terms of users accessing the website. So If you get more and more users, and you'll see kind of loading, what you want to do is add another plugin to create a cache of popular pages, so that they are already rendered and ready for anyone when they are called upon. So WP Super Cache, and there are many others that are all popular, but WP Cache is the one we use, and I think it's the overall favorite, and it's free. It will cache various pages of your website and speed up its functionality. So if you're experiencing slowness on your WordPress website, add a plugin like this, and it'll speed things up. To back up, you want to, I've made this mistake so many times, where I create a WordPress website and I don't back up, and then something breaks and I lose the whole website because I don't have a backup. So you want to, Updraft Plus is by far the most popular free plugin for managing updates to plugins and managing backups of your website so you don't lose anything. Managing and also does migration a little bit, but I prefer Duplicator as another free program. If you're you're migrating from one server to another, you just tell it what is your old server location and what is your new server location, and it'll rewrite all the code for you in a free way, so you can move it from one location to another. So I use Duplicator when I'm creating a local version of WordPress on my local computer, not in the web. And then when I want to publish it on the web, I use Duplicator to change all the links and change the code itself to the new destination. So it's awesome. To help with SEO, there's a free plugin called Google XML Sitemaps for WordPress I encourage you to install. It just creates some more backend code to help your site be discoverable by Google in terms of the various pages and what they're all about. Security can be a big problem. So WordFence is a very robust free plugin. There's a premium one if you want to buy it, but I've never needed it. And it blocks people trying to break your website. We get up to 500 attempts a day to break our website. Once I had 7,000 in 2 hours because I didn't have WordFence installed. And in 2 hours, it was basically one person in 2 hours making 7,000 individual calls onto our website to try to break it. And after 7,000 calls, they did break it, and they replaced our website with their code, which was junk. It was terrible. And if we'd had WordFence installed, this was years ago, but if we'd had WordFence installed as a free security plugin, it would have prevented those break-ins. Smush will basically smush up all your images. So if you upload images, it will create like 10 versions of different sizes of that same image to optimize for your mobile phone, for a tablet, for a laptop, for a big computer, small computer, for different devices. So that, and you don't need to do anything about it. You just install this free plugin, and it'll automatically smush and create these various versions so that your website will be able to offer the lightest or the most profoundly deep version of your website compared to the user's needs. Drag and drop functionality is essential using WordPress. Most themes offer one of 3 built-in, so you can buy these. Visual Composer, WP Bakery, and Elementor. They are drag and drop plugins, allow you to just see, like use a WS WIG, what you see, WYS WIG, what you see, what you get editor, and drag and drop interface to create content. So there's no need for any code. You don't need to know HTML at all. And you can buy those if you like, but when you buy a theme, usually one of those 3 are offered as a part of the theme. So you basically just buy that drag and drop interface as a part of the theme. I like Visual Composer, I think, the best, but there's WP Bakery and Visual Composer are fighting it out constantly. They're both awesome. They're both great, so it really doesn't matter, which I have a personal preference for Visual Composer, but it doesn't really matter. Elementor, I think there's a free version of it, so it's an alternative. If you buy a theme and there's no drag and drop interface, then you could potentially look at Elementor for a free option. If you engage community, you have forums or you want a social network on your website, then I would look at BuddyPress. It's free, open source, and there are themes that are built explicitly for BuddyPress that you could look at offering. Monster Insights, I glossed over. Monster Insights, if you want to use Google Analytics to monitor all of your kind of site visits and so on, I showed you Austats from my server, but if you don't want to use your server, Monster Insights is another free plugin that will allow you to manage your Google Analytics account with your WordPress website. So it's also very good. If you want to have a form and you want to survey and ask questions of your community, but you don't want to pay for it, then Ninja Forms and WP Forms are the two best options out there. I use Ninja Forms for a really simple, it's a drag and drop interface. It works very much like MailChimp if you've used MailChimp before in terms of creating various elements. It has multiple choice and single choice and long form and so on. You can't do contingency routing and complex things like that, but basic forms, it's very useful, and it's a lightweight function. It's a lightweight plugin as well. WP Forms is the other alternative. If you're going to go multilingual, WPML, WordPress multilingual plugin is awesome. I love it. It's $60 for like a forever license for unlimited number of websites. I think it's about $60 US. And so it allows you to create your multilingual versions of your website in a very easy to interface. And it has multiple plugins, so you can support BuddyPress and any other plugin. Really, there's usually some kind of support. There's a support for Ninja Forms, creating bilingual Ninja Forms. There's support through WPML for that. So it is the industry leader if you need to be multilingual. Most WordPress, Drupal, and so on, in terms of mail. So if you have a form on your website and you want them to click on it and send mail to you, or you want to send mail to them if they click on something, most WordPress, Drupal, and so on, they use PHP to send mail, and most shared hosting won't permit that, because PHP mail is by far the vast majority, major source of spam on the planet, is PHP mail sources. So most shared hosting don't allow PHP mail support through WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. So you need an alternative. And so SMTP, which is what Google, and it's a secure mail transfer protocol. It's more secure than just basic PHP mail is. WP Mail SMTP will offer that free support to you in terms of mail for your WordPress installation. Push notifications is something that I haven't gone into for our website yet, but I'm starting to look at. So someone does something on your website, and you want so they click on your subscribe button, or they click on a particular event. When you want to offer the option, would you like to receive a reminder when this is updated, a notification to them, whether it's directly in the browser while they're there or emailed to them? That's kind of what push notifications are. And OneSignal, Gravitech, and SendPulse are the top three that I've found so far. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to find a free version of push notifications, but some of the ones that have the highest number of notification calls and notification sends for free seem to be those three. But if you're kind of interested in offering push notifications, so engaging your constituencies with your website in a more interactive way in the future, you could look at push notification, open source and free solutions out there. But these ones are the ones that I've found so far. I said I would talk a little bit more about Culture Creates. So Culture Creates is supported by the Digital Strategy Fund. They've done two major phases of funding. And what they're doing is they're creating a code snippet that you can install on your website and allow you to create it's an editor. And so when you add an event or an image or a post on your website, you can add metadata and edit the metadata for that event, that post, that content on your website, so that it will connect to, if you remember, open link data on the semantic web, the new technology that's out there, that your site will respond to this new technology and make your events and your content discoverable with all these kinds of live event platforms that are out there. They're saying when you say, hey, Google, what's happening in Toronto tonight in the performing arts? And there's like 10 searches that are read out to you if you're, have one of these, speaking tools. I forget, what do you call them? The Amazon one. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. And Siri and so on, that when you do a voice search, so many people are now doing voice to text searches for what's happening. They're not typing it manually on their device, they're on their phone, and they say, hey Siri, or hey Google, or the one in Amazon that I'm forgetting the name of it. What's happening tonight? And by far, SEO old metadata technology is not cutting it anymore in terms of getting your event discoverable. It needs to be linked to this newer technology, open link data on the semantic web. So culture creates, you don't need to know anything about what this technology is or what it works, how it works, but you want to look at getting that code. If you're interested in using this and being more discoverable, use that code snippet, and your data gets put into a cooperative called artsdata.ca. It's for the performing arts currently, but I hope they will grow out in the future in terms of helping you manage your metadata beyond just traditional SEO. If you have lots of events, there's a free plugin called the Events Calendar from Modern Tribe, and there's also a paid version, a premium version that we used connected to WooCommerce to offer much more robust. So our digital ASO, Digital Art Services Symposium that we did a few years ago, was using the Events Calendar Premium and WooCommerce to sell all the tickets and all the engagement, all the registration for the events. But there are free plugins for the events calendar to add that onto your WordPress installation. City CRM is an open source project. It's very robust, and it's available as a plugin, I believe, for WordPress, Drupal, and Joomla. And it's a content management system, but you can manage creating events and creating newsletters, managing your registrations. You can sell stuff, you can manage cases, so managing your clients and how they are going through various stages of engagement with you. You can manage grants, and you can manage donations and all kinds of things through Civi CRM as a free open source project. It's one of the most robust that I know that's out there. It is not for the faint of heart. In terms of customizing it right out of the box, if you just want to use it as a content manager, it's great. If you want to customize how it looks, you're going to need some help. But as a free CRM in your own website, it's very useful. Suite CRM is not a plugin for WordPress, but is another open source project that you can install on your website that I think is useful as another alternative. If you're managing HR, Orange HRM, or Human Resource Management, is an open source project for managing HR teams. Like your contracts, how much do you owe them? Like when did they start? What's their employment numbers? And what is their contract? If you need to kind of manage all that HR stuff and vacations, and if you have bigger teams, Orange HRM might be for you. You need to have a server. It could be a shared host. It doesn't need to be a dedicated server, but you can install Orange HRM. I'm using it for my HR. If you want to do surveys beyond like Google surveys and you want to have a bit more control, Lime Survey is an open source project. That's what I use for I Lost My Gig. If you've seen the I Lost My Gig survey, it's run by Lime Survey. If you are trying to manage bibliographies, so if you're doing research and you're trying to manage resources, Zotero for me is the best of the bunch. There's a lot like Mendeley that are out there but Zotero is by far the best. It's free, it's open source. There's local and cloud versions of your database, so you can share out your bibliography in the cloud so other people can see it and they can add to it, so you can collaborate on it. And the best part is it syncs up with Word and Google Docs and so on, so you can manage all your works. If you're writing research papers, you can cite from Zotero and automatically create your bibliographies in whatever format you want. Vancouver, Chicago, American Psychology Association, through Zotero is all possible. So if you've seen it all, the Ground Story Wet Space Research Project, which includes over 2,000 resources in the bibliography, all of that was created through Zotero. It has a little plugin for Firefox and Chrome. So if you're visiting a website or Amazon or a library and you have a resource, a book, and there's all that metadata there, you just click on the plugin and it automatically downloads all of the metadata into Zotero. But I really like it because it syncs up with Word and Google for citation. So if you do research, I would look into it. If you have tons of information that you want to share and have interaction with it, with your users, so if you have lots of events or lots of programs, activities that you're trying to share, you may want to look at Airtable. It is not, there's a free version, I think, limited number of calls, but you may need to look at a subscription package. It offers a pretty dynamic interface and look and feel for which are essentially spreadsheets, but it doesn't look like that way. So you have lots of listings in any kind of way or lots of content. Airtable may be for you. I mentioned I would have a potential resource to mention about streaming your own video. So the Arts Management System or Art Management Network, which is funded by the Digital Strategy Fund, it's amsnetwork.ca, is an arts management support system that's being developed by the Alberta, well, what is it? Now I'm forgetting the name of it. They used to have it used to be called Film Reel. It's the Alberta Film and Video Society, FAVA, the Film and Video Society of Alberta. They're the developers of it, and it's not open source yet, and it's not free, but it might be in the future. We're looking at collaborating with them in creating an open source version of it. And it's a full CRM and content management, content dissemination platform, mostly for artist-run centers. And so it's for organizations as opposed to individuals, but you might want to look at it as an option. And they have an option in their platform to create like a mini YouTube for your own work at whatever destination address you want it to be at. And so you upload your video into AMS Network, and then you can disseminate and publish it. So if you wanted to create your own alternative to YouTube and we want to celebrate Black artists in Canada, it's possible that AMS Network might be the way to go. Engaging. So we've created content. We now have a website that people are visiting and they see our content, and maybe we're selling some things around using e-commerce. But what about in this pandemic situation about actually talking with and engaging communities in real time? Yeah, that's a big need, right? And we all know about Zoom because we're on Zoom, but what else is out there? What are some of the alternatives that maybe are, there's some ethical concerns around Zoom because of it canceling a massive event in China to protest political issues in China, and it got canceled. Zoom didn't allow it to happen. And so there's some ethical concerns around Zoom. And it's not necessarily affordable for a lot of people when you get to the more than 100 people per person. So let's look at some other options that are out there. And how to live stream. So if you've never heard of OBS Studio, which is an open source project, and then there's another version of it that's a bit more robust, but also heavier as a result, called Streamlabs, OBS Streamlabs. So OBS Studio open source, Streamlabs just made it, took the open source software that OBS manages and upped it. So it looks better. The interface is more attractive. It offers a few things that OBS Studio does not do. So you could look in and evaluate between the two. In fact, I'm using OBS Studio right now for this. And what you can do, so I'm using it to broadcast my screen and share it with you. And we're going to have a hands-on on how to use OBS. OBS Studio allows you to record videos to your own computer locally, but also stream simultaneously, potentially, to multiple platforms. So we could use OBS Studio to take multiple cameras and choose views between those cameras. I could add my a little headshot, have a pop-up window down in the bottom left-hand corner of just me talking. You know, you see that on YouTube all the time. You see someone talking and they'll have themselves down in the bottom left-hand corner with their company logo or whatever. You can do all kinds of things with OBS. In terms of activation, you can have many camera views. Yeah, this is a Zoom-based event, but I'm choosing how to share my screen with you using OBS Studio, and which is another program, has nothing to do with Zoom. But we can use OBS Studio to live stream to YouTube, to Facebook, to Instagram Live with support of Yellow Duck. You can't use OBS Studio and go straight to Instagram Live. You need a free, awesome little software tool called Yellow Duck to be able to live stream from OBS into Instagram. And then to go to Twitch and other platforms. Someone asked about Google Meet. So I think there's a what are we talking about here? So there is video conferencing, and then there's live streaming. Those are two different things. So video conferencing is, okay, you meet and through a specific platform, whether it's OBS Studio or Zoom, or I have a couple actually down below there, Open Meetings, Whereby, and Jitsi.org are all alternatives. Open Meetings and Jitsi are open source. Whereby is not, but it's trying to be more affordable. They're all video conferencing alternatives to Zoom. That's one thing. Then the second thing is live streaming, and that's the idea of live streaming whatever content you want and producing from various audio devices, from various video devices, sharing various screens and controlling what the end result looks like and streaming that live to Facebook Live, to YouTube Live, to Twitch, to Instagram Live, which then becomes a recorded, if you decide to keep it there permanently, to keep it as a recorded video. That's what OBS Studio and Streamlabs will allow you to do. So it's a very different concept from Zoom. It's not a video conferencing application. It doesn't allow people to come in and visit you through OBS. It allows you to share your screen and then choose how you want. Well, okay, live stream is free. Well, yes and no. You can live stream to YouTube for free. You can live stream to Instagram for free. You can live stream to Facebook for free. But you need free software and you need good hardware to be able to do all of that for free. We can do a whole nother session in the future about the difference between live streaming and video conferencing, but I don't have time right now. If there's trouble, if you are a bunch of musicians, there is challenge with audio sync in Zoom, in having a live performance and having all the audio from the different sources syncing up. So it sounds like, so you have to kind of jam with if you use Zoom audio by default, you have to expect that there won't be this need for syncness. If you want to sync, there is an open source project and then a pretty free project or affordable project. The open source one is called Jack Trip, and the affordable one is called Jazz Kazam. And they will allow you to sync up audio sources from multiple Zoom accounts and sync them up so that all your Zoom users will be hearing one audio experience. So you can have a jam using those two, like a live jam in Zoom, a live performance, using those two solutions. Jitsi.org is an open source version of Zoom. It it only launched like last year sometime, I believe. And so it had a very high demand at the beginning of the pandemic. It went from like 10,000 users to 12 million in about like 4 months. So there was a lot of bandwidth challenges in the early days, but I think because they have 12 million users that they've got some investment in, and it's beefed up. So the experience is a little bit better. But if you want to, I chose not to use Jitsi because I was having too many challenges with bandwidth. But if you want to have an alternative to Zoom, and you don't have a lot of users, it's small meetings, Jitsi is an option. Microsoft Teams is trying to be the competitor to Google Meet and to the competitor to Google Zoom, or to Zoom, sorry. It still doesn't work as well on both Mac and Windows. That's my main concern about it. It's otherwise very robust. Microsoft is always behind on its development for Mac. Chatting is often useful. Rocket Chat is an open source project. It's pretty robust, so it's not for the light of heart. But if you want to support chatting through your website, Rocket Chat is maybe something you might want to look at. Discord is an alternative to Slack, and Element is another alternative to Slack in terms of chatting and building up a community. If you've never used Signal for chatting through text in a way that is secure, and not worrying about any privacy concerns, I would get on Signal. Instead of just chatting through Messenger or through your phone, I would install Signal. It's free, it's open source, and it's so much more secure. So Apple or Microsoft or whatever isn't monitoring your messages. If you're chatting with people, I would use Signal. If you need really cheap phones and you've never used VoIP, a lot of people are on voice over internet protocol. If you want an alternate, like I use this, I have my cell phone, right? And I don't necessarily want all the time to advertise my personal phone number as a business phone number. I want to have some alternatives. But I don't want to pay an arm and a leg for it either, because most of the time I don't need anyone to call me. Or those that do, they already know my personal number, and so they call me there. So I want to spend like $5 a year or something like that on a phone number that I can advertise as an alternative. And VoIP.ms is the best option that I could find for the freest, best service, and the most customization for having a VoIP number. So you can get like a 1-800 number or a local number anywhere in the world for really low cost. And you can create just like a voicemail where someone calls that number and leaves a voicemail, and it emails to you the recording. So I use that for ArtsPond as an alternative voicemail for instead of my own number. We also have a 1-800 number that we use for our different staff across the country. So we don't necessarily, and it's insanely cheap, like less than 1 cent a minute for people to call us. So I like put in $50, and 3 years later I might need to pay some more. Like it's really cheap. Oh dear, we're running out of time. In terms of posting to social media, I'm sure all of you have tried out or heard of Hootsuite and Buffer. The free ones, the challenge is that there's just not enough accounts for the free. Hootsuite's Canadian. I like to support them, but I have too many social media accounts, and I can't afford to pay for one. So the problem is I need to create multiple accounts, multiple email accounts, and I split across Hootsuite and Buffer for different accounts. I prefer Buffer because the interface is simpler than Hootsuite. But if you really need dynamic control over your social media, then Hootsuite's probably better for you. In terms of accessibility, you're seeing Otter.ai in practice. There's a free account for 500 minutes a month. The pro account allows you to have 3 simultaneous accounts, creating live notes that you can edit and do and comment on while the notes are happening. But it's 5,000 minutes a month instead of 500 minutes a month. But it isn't all that affordable. I can only afford it because we got a grant. If you really want to offer captioning or transcripting support to deaf people or just people who have visual learning challenges and want to see text and not just listen audibly all the time, the free version that I think is the best is webcaptioner.com. If you give them your email address, it's free, but if you give them their email address, you can not only create captions that look like, whatever design you want, including like black and white that you see as closed caption on television. You can exactly mimic that, or you can design it however you want. But if you give them your email, you can download a transcript of the captions afterwards. If you need to translate to multiple languages, especially French and Canadian French, DeepL, there's a web version or a standalone for Windows. There isn't a standalone for Mac yet, but there's a web version. DeepL, I find, is the best translator for Francophone French, as opposed to just Parisian French. Finding contacts has been one of the biggest challenges for us as an organization, and building out a contact list. And you're brand new and you want to know you want to email some folks because they're not subscribers. So this is where you start getting into web crawling technology. And the first one we used was import.io. And when it first launched about 4 years ago, it was free and not open source, but it was free as it was in beta, and it's no longer free. There is a free version of it in terms of a limited number of calls per month. But web crawling in general gets kind of expensive. It gets up to like $300 a month for the paid services. But all the ones I've given you here on the screen, so import.io, Crawly, AnyPicker, Portia, Scrape.io, Hunter.io, and Octoparse have free versions or low-cost versions, and they will either scrape the web and find email addresses or find website links and whatever content you want, pull and scrape the web for the information that you're looking for. So that's how I've used these tools to find contact and build up contact databases to be able to reach out with the community. Some plugins for Chrome. Chrome is the browser I currently use. If you are designing and you want to find, okay, what color is on that page that you're currently seeing? Colorzilla is the one I use. There are a whole bunch of them, but Colorzilla is a nice free extension. Web Developer Toolbar will allow, if you've never seen it, will allow you to kind of look at the behind the scenes of websites. So often if you see a website and it's you like the image there, but you want to download it just to play with, not to use publicly, but just to play with it. But it doesn't allow you to download that image. Because there's some security around it. The Web Developer Toolbar will allow you to preview all the images from the back-end point of view as opposed to the front-end point of view, and that sometimes gets behind some of the site security that sites are. But that's not what I use it for. I'm only use it to see how the websites are designed and to disable images and see the structure of websites. So I find it helpful from a web design point of view. If you're doing multiple searches, also trying to build out and find community, rather than searching one tab at a time, you can use free plugins for your extensions, like open multiple URLs and multiple tab searches to automatically search a list of domains for you, or a list of various kinds of keyword searches automatically in different tabs for you, rather than you having to do it manually. So I create web searches or lists of websites in Excel, and then cut and paste it into open multiple URLs or multiple tab search, and it'll automatically go and search for me. Email Extractor is a free extension also that will go in and search various website domains and find all the emails that are associated with that domain for you. You won't necessarily know who the contacts are, but you'll find all the emails that are associated with that domain. So those are very useful when you also, obviously, as you're building out contacts and using these tools, you want to make sure that you are using those contacts ethically. As not-for-profits, you're allowed to reach out a couple times a year using CASL, Canadian anti-spam legislation. As not-for-profits, it's possible to reach out and advertise your work if it's for public good and for not-for-profit purposes. But you just be aware that don't use these tools to kind of break out and create lots of spam in the world. So you want to use it with legitimate ethical purposes. The last four I wanted to mention are Digital Strategy Fund projects and Culture Brew. You should already know about. Charles mentioned it at the top. It's a community for Black and Indigenous and people of color. intercultural artists infusing change. Stage Page is not necessarily culturally diverse specific, but it is a recommender. It's trying to support push notifications for your work. So offering recommendations to visitors to say, oh, go see this, or go see this, or go see that. It hasn't been launched yet. I just heard about it at the last round, but it has some promise. Indefinite Art Center is creating a social network for people with disabilities called Art Story. Don't know anything more about it other than really that. So I may be a bit premature here in notifying people about it, but it's looking very promising in terms of a disability arts community, which is a priority for us. And Creative Users Projects has been working for 2 years now, year and a half, on creating some support around accessing the arts for accessibility arts projects and discovering arts events that have accessibility focuses. And so they should be pretty good in terms of some tools if you're looking at access. And that is it. Thank you. 4:01, 1 minute over. I see one question about live transcribing meetings for minutes. So the answer is otter.ai is my favorite. You're seeing it running in the chat. We can put the link in again. It's creating a live transcription here. I'll put it on the screen. Otter.ai is my favorite. So it will auto, eventually, once it's creating, it's not so great, but from this perspective, but it's recognizing voice prints. So, and it's recognizing if it's tied, this is not tied to this Zoom account, but if it was tied to my Zoom account, it would also recognize Zoom user names and or has the potential to do that, so that it will recognize speakers. And so right now it's just creating various paragraphs, but if it was connected to my Zoom account, and you need the pro account to be able to do this, it would then create speaker names, or speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3 is the default. It's anonymous, but you can name the speakers by, and then it'll search through the rest of the meeting notes itself and name all of those instances based on a voice print of what it thinks that speaker name is. So it's your notes, right? And it is saved in the cloud. So there's an audio recording that goes with it. So you can download the audio recording, because the transcription is about 60 to 70% accurate. You can go back afterwards and edit the transcript notes itself. But I like that there's an audio recording that goes with it. So anything that is missed in terms of the translation, you can go back and listen to the audio and make the changes. And it's all saved in the cloud, so it's awesome. The other one I mentioned was webcaptioner.com. You can download a transcript if you give them your email. Does that answer your questions? Any last? I can stay for like 5 minutes, but 5 more minutes if they're really pressing questions. I know I've given you a lot to look at, but if you have any questions, did anyone use Zoom or Google Meet before COVID? Yeah, I think a lot of people, well, Google Meet is new, right? It's not that, it's kind of trying to replace Hangouts, which became insecure for a while. So Google Meets, I'm not sure, I think lots of people are using them now, but I don't think that many people were using Zoom on a regular basis before COVID. Zoom has become the default because they were able to ramp up their support and offer a quality service in terms of bandwidth compared to other services quickly. They had the capital to grow and support. Skype is fine. Skype, I still use Skype. I still use FaceTime. It all depends on different users and what they're practiced using. They're all fine and amazing for different purposes. It's whether you want to have a recording, and if you want to have more than just say 10 or 20 people, if you want to have like 500 people or 200 people or 75 people, or you want to meet more than like Zoom, the free account, you can't meet more than 45 minutes if you have if you have a larger group of people. You have to buy the pro account. Whereas Skype, there isn't that same limit, but there is a limit to the maximum number of users you can use for Skype. So it's really just looking at all of the restrictions for the various solutions that are out there and making a decision about which one is best for you. I can't make a specific recommendation. I'm not going to do that because your needs are all going to be specific. Zoom is not accessible in some countries. Yeah, so one of the biggest issues to decide on these video conferencing platforms is how heavy are they on computers and how heavy are they on bandwidth. So Jitsi is trying to be light, the open source one is trying to be light. Teams is that by far the heaviest. And Zoom is the next heaviest, and then Google Meets and Skype and all these other ones are trying to be in the light end as well. And by being light, like the quality of video on Skype and on Google Meet and the quality of audio is very poor, I find, and they're inconsistent. Like some days the connection is awesome, and other days the connections are terrible. So if you want some consistency and expectation for your video conferencing, then Zoom and yeah, Zoom right now is the only one that's really meeting expectations. Any other questions before we wind up? With my thanks and gratitude. Thanks so much for staying attention. We didn't lose anyone basically for the session. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for listening.